Hey everybody, my name is Jasmine Henderson and welcome tonight. This is the Ohio Voices Informing Energy Choices panel. This is our first panel. Again, my name is Jasmine Henderson. First, I am a West Dayton native through and through and through. After that, I am a political consultant, a political strategist, and a grassroots organizer. And I want to thank you so much tonight for attending our panel to learn more about the energy choices that we have here in Ohio, but also about the Energy Jobs and Justice Act. So without further ado, I'm actually going to take a step back and introduce our panel and the wonderful people that we have here from around Ohio today who are doing the work, y'all. There's really no other way I can describe it other than doing the work to make sure that environmental work, energy work, the work that grassroots people like myself are doing on the ground are highlighted, but also represented in policy that is fair, that is equitable, and is sustainable economically, y'all. So without further ado, one of the first Hello, can everybody hear me?
We can.
Okay. Was there a lag in there? Because I introduced Samia. Okay, my bad. So so there was
I
a big
apologize. It dipped out for a minute. I couldn't hear what you said.
absolutely. I was
So,
just introductions with you, Samia. So we were just going to start with you.
Wonderful. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Samia Bray. I'm here representing the Black Environmental Leaders Association tonight. And I just want to say that this is one of the projects of Black environmental leaders. We have a special thank you to the Joyce Foundation, who has provided support for this evening's conversation as we explore and we travel across Ohio, looking at Ohio voices informing our energy choices. And so I'm very excited to be here tonight. I serve as co-director alongside David Wilson and in the legacy of Jacqueline Gillen. And so we're excited about tonight's conversation. We have some powerful friends with us tonight, and thank you, each and every one of you, for joining us.
Yes, yes, this is going to be a powerful panel tonight. Thank you so much, Samia, for going. And next, without further ado, Representative Juanita Brent, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juanita. I just happen to be a state representative representing House District 12 up here in Cuyahoga County in the Cleveland area. I represent Cleveland and 9 other suburbs, 35,000 people. Let me be very direct with it. So I'm just glad to be a part of this. This is something environmental justice is. We have to be very intentional and disciplined about making sure that we are bringing voices of change. And I am just a steward of this on the law side, so we can make sure that we get laws to be in place for the policy that we're looking forward to doing.
I love Representative Brent's like humbleness. Like, oh, I'm just, even though I'm going to be the person at the State House representing this policy and this act and representing all of Ohioans when it comes to fair and equitable energy. I'm just, but I love it. And next, but not least, we have Chanel Smith. Take it away.
Hi, Jasmine. It's really wonderful to be here tonight with my sisters in the fight. I've been on this environmental justice journey for over a decade now, and I can't believe it. And I remember back in the days just calling on Jackie just to get some advice and how to navigate this world, as there was once very few people of color in this space. And I'm so happy that there's more people coming into our family here. I'm a lifelong Ohioan, growing up in small town Lima, Ohio, and I've been in Cleveland for over a decade. And during the day, I work at a big regional bank here in Key, focused on our community benefits plan and making sure that we are contributing to our community. And I'm still a community activist focused on all things Cleveland, all things Ohio, all things justice and equity. So happy to be here tonight.
We can't wait to have you on the panel because you just came out with official fire for your intro. So thank you for the heat that you just brought because we needed that. But we also want to take this time to talk about the actual bill that's on the floor here in the state of Ohio. So it's called the Energy, Jobs, and Justice Act. And this is very important. If you've watched any of the other panels that we have done, we also have another panel that's going on right now called Black Landscapers Matters. We are consistently talking about the fact that environmental justice is racial justice, and BIPOC people, Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, working class people, rural people, all throughout the state of Ohio continuously lose whenever we're not talking about environmental justice. And the reason why environmental justice is a racial justice issue is because it impacts every part of our lives when it comes to health and sustainability. The water that you drink is determined by a policy. The air that you breathe is determined by a policy. Things that we build our homes with are determined by policies at the state level. Disproportionately, we're often left behind because we're not at the table. And that's one of the most important things about panels like tonight is we are creating a space with Black environmental justice leaders. We're creating a space with people like Chanel. We're creating a space with people like Representative Brent. And we're saying we're here. We're not going anywhere. And there's time that we have to have a sustainable conversation about energy that centralizes the people who lose the most when we are talking about energy. And we know that intersectional conversations like this oftentimes are not had. So I actually wanted to turn it back over to Samia, who's been so instrumental in not only building up policies like this in the State House, but also building a culture of Black people, brown people, BIPOC people to be empowered enough to use our voices, but use our eyes to be able to take a look around our communities and see the injustices for ourselves and be able to relate it to a larger environment and know that we have the power to change it. So I'm just going to turn it over to Samia.
Well, thank you, Jasmine. So I just a little bit for those of you who are just learning about Black Environmental Leaders Association, or if it's been a while since you've chatted with us, we were really formed because we understood that there were people of color who were really engaged throughout the country, really. And the National Wildlife Federation, the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, and the Alliance for the Great Lakes came together and said, people of color who are all out here, we were looking around the room, and far too often, we were the only face that looked like us in these rooms. And it became evident that there needed to be a space where people could come, could be the experts that they are, can be the leaders that they are, and at the same time still be able to go back and do their work. And so that's where Black Environmental Leaders Association was born. And that's why we're all what's called Black Environmental Leaders, because every single member of BEL is a leader in their respective rights. And where does that get us today? So my area is energy. I love energy. You can see my wind turbine in the background. I'm all about that solar, that wind, that EVs. I love all of it. But I also like breathing clean air, drinking safe water, and being able to grow my vegetables in soil that is not going to poison me. And so that being the case, tonight we're talking about energy choices. I'd like to just give an overview as we look at, everybody has heard about House Bill 6 and the alleged scandal of $61 million being paid to be able to move that legislation forward. So tonight is not a legislative meeting, it's an informational conversation. And in that conversation, we had an opportunity to continue to go after, well, this isn't right, well, that isn't right, well, this isn't right. Well, at BEL, we take a proactive approach and say, okay, that's not right. The federal government is investigating that. They're on top of that. They're taking care of that. We'll see where that ends. What we then said is we said, how about we begin to align ourselves and look at what does good energy policy look like? Good, comprehensive energy policy. What does that look like? And what we began to understand is there's three big pieces: equity. As Jasmine said, there are people who time and time again, who look like us, who get left out of the conversation. Then there is carbon reduction. Each and every one of us are impacted by the the impacts of climate change. And if we don't reduce our carbon usage, our carbon footprint, then we will all pay that price. Doesn't matter how much money you have, we will all pay that price. And then the third area is accountability and transparency. $61 million worth of alleged corruption doesn't happen when there are checks and balances that can begin to support accountability and transparency. Each one of us have inherited some legislation in some ways that doesn't necessarily represent what our life looks like today. And so as we look at policy like the Energy Jobs and Justice Act, it actually looks at policies that are no longer serving us and make recommendations about putting in place comprehensive policy that could in fact make some adjustments. So we're really excited about what this opportunity has before us, especially in these unprecedented times, where the possibility of centers across the state that would amplify and accelerate Black, Indigenous, and people of color engagement within the renewable energy and energy space, both as contractors, owners of businesses, and employees of companies, not just consumers. We're very excited about that. So I'm going to stop there because I really want to get into it with our friends tonight. I want to hear this fire that Chanel is getting ready to bring. I want to hear this wisdom that Rep. Brent is bringing. So that's probably the most y'all going to hear me talking tonight. Unless y'all get me riled up, then I can't be held. And they said like the Holy Ghost taking over, I can't be held responsible for what happened after that. So Jasmine, I'm going to pass it back to you. And let's hear from our guests tonight.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
Yes, I'm ready too. Emphasis on the word comprehensive. And I think we cannot have a conversation, like Samia said, about comprehensive bills and comprehensive energy if we're not talking about economic equity and what we can do to make sure that jobs, sustainability, but also reinventing what energy looks like, not only being consumers, but being in charge of how can we hone that in and keep that within our communities looks like. So I actually want to turn over the first question to anybody who wants to answer, but I will definitely push it towards Chanel because I can feel the fire right now. And so how is the Energy Jobs and Justice Act finally creating equity and environmentally, but also economically for our communities? I know basically when we were talking previously, you said we've been here before, but now it's time to take it further. So how is the Energy Jobs and Justice Act taking it further, especially economically?
Well, I definitely better bring some fire because you all have definitely set me up to do so. You know, I think about it in terms of we've been here before. 10 years ago or 11 years ago, there was a conversation, a national conversation about a transition, about a just transition. And some states move forward, the coastal states, California, New York, Oregon, and Ohio was on its way, right? We had a renewable portfolio standard. We had the types of policies that would support wind development, would support solar development. But over the years, we saw a regressive approach to that. Even when Ohio implemented its renewable portfolio standard, that was a bipartisan bill that the state passed and that the governor signed. That was Republicans and Democrats from all over parts of Ohio, from Cleveland to Lima to Findlay, small towns and big towns. But somewhere in the middle, we got lost. And because we got lost, we lost opportunities for jobs. We lost opportunities to clean up our environment. We lost opportunities to improve our health. I don't know the calculation, but I bet that there is some sort of health loss or health impact to our communities because some of our communities have not been able to transition justly. Personally, I grew up in a community that has environmental justice issues. By the time I was 30, I dealt with cancer twice. Now, there's no exact evidence that it was because of the community that I grew up in, but the likelihood is strong because majority of Black and Latino communities are on the fence line, or near chemical plants, or near coal-fired plants. And then you look at this from a health perspective, a jobs perspective, the dollars and cents, it just makes sense. Like the cost of solar, the cost of wind is comparable, if not less than traditional fossil fuels. So much so that you see corporations and other entities and other governments moving forward to transition to clean energy. Now, the question becomes, and what we need to make sure of is that we're not left behind. And that's why I personally support this bill, because it starts at the just transition, understanding that there will be opportunities for jobs, opportunities for communities to embrace community solar. But how do we, as Black folks, and how do our communities take advantage of that? I think it's through things like apprenticeships. And we all know the building trades are aging. They're losing people by the day. So there's an opportunity and a model for us to embrace, where Samia and I actually met through our time at our previous work, to make sure that there are apprenticeship opportunities for Black folks to move through the building trades. Because these are jobs that people use their hands, they're electricians, plumbers, every trade that you can mention, there's a job opportunity in the clean energy economy. So I love this bill. I love that the opportunity that we're thinking about, how do you put 15 centers across the state of Ohio so that people have access to these jobs and in the opportunities that are coming. So that's initially how I definitely think about this. And I don't want us to miss out on this opportunity. I don't want Ohio to continue to miss out. And that's why it's important that people like Representative Brent are leading on this legislation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for what you just said and being open and vulnerable about sharing your story, specifically with having to be faced with cancer twice. I can give you some of the energy impacts that have happened in our community centers, what we call just transition communities in the jobs, Energy Jobs and Justice Act. You have higher rates of, unfortunately, asthma because of the breathing. You have higher rates of cancer. Particularly in my community, there is a trash dump that sits right beside a small business hub in West Dayton, and unfortunately a state prison. My father used to work there. Disproportionately, most people who retire from that prison die of cancer because it is sat across from a dump for the past 60 years. So that's why it's so important to have acts like this, but also to be able to do. I'm a big person when it comes to bills about earmarkings and labeling things, to be very specific. So it touched my heart when I read the bill to see the just transition communities, because I know that that's my community. I know that I need to be represented not only in the language, but in the earmarks and where the money goes and who deserves proper representation, because we know that equity isn't always equality. And we know that sometimes our bills are written from the stance of everybody is represented, which means some people are left behind. And with that being said, I wanted to turn over our next question to Representative Brent. And Representative Brent, you obviously are one of our state house representatives. That was repetitive, sorry about that. But we just really wanted to really talk in terms of each legislator and how do we work to make sure that each legislator gives support to this type of bill. How do we make this bill bipartisan again? And why is it so important for us as community leaders watching this to kind of implore your colleagues to become a sponsor on a bill such as EJA?
So this experience of any bill becoming law is dealing with building relationships. I remember the first time you and I had a conversation with Jasmine, you told me your story and I was like, I used to live on Salem, right around the corner from you. So just in a sense of telling your story, it connects people together. And so we have to be in those places where we make ourselves vulnerable, like Chanel talked about her story of having cancer twice and connecting that with her community. And my colleagues, they live in these different places. The Speaker of the House, as well as the Senate President, lives in Lima. And so when we think about, the next Speaker of the House is from Dayton. I'm just give you a little inside track to where catch that T that I just gave you. Next speaker's from Dayton. Okay, catch that T. Okay, you got it. Okay. So when we talk about stories, we have to make sure we are expressing our stories, because that connects people to what's going on. It's not just a us story, that's a everybody's story. That is not just Chanel's story or Jasmine's story or my story. So we have to be in a place where we're telling a story and we're being very consistent with doing that. If that means you need to send 50 million emails to the speaker or 50 million emails to the chair of this committee, like Chair Hoops is the chairman of the committee. How many times have people reached out to him regarding House Bill 429? By the way, his email is rep81@ohiohouse.gov. So if we're trying to really move a bill, we need to talk to the people who are making the decisions. He is the decision making. The chair decides on when there is going to be a committee hearing. We have to put the pressure on him. We also have to put the pressure on the vice chair of the committee. That's Representative Sharon Ray. She is Rep 69@ohiohouse.gov. We have to put the pressure on her and say, we need a committee hearing for this bill. Also sitting down with legislators before you even introduce the bill and explaining on how this is going to affect their community. People don't know until they show how it's going to affect their individual community. Give people numbers. When someone initially sits down with me and they tell me like, hey, House District 12 has been disproportionately affected by that, and I can show you the numbers, then I'm like, wow, I need to really make some change because these people are voters. And if I don't do what they tell me to do, they're going to get me out of office. I got a rowdy bunch in my district, so if I don't get it together, they try to get rid of me quickly.
I'm not in her district. I'm not in her district.
Chanel, you trying to get rid of me on the low? But
I'm just not one of the ones being rowdy.
I beg to differ about that part, but yeah, maybe you just not be a rowdy in her district.
In my district. So just being very intentional that you make information very district related will just tell people that that's not a them problem, that's a us problem. So we have to have those conversations where it just hits the ground on what's going on within our time to get more people involved. And that takes time. I just had a bill that came out of a committee. It took a year. Actually, if you want to say total, it took 3 years. It took 2 years of one whole General Assembly, and then it took an additional year for this year, but 3 years just to get it out of committee. 3 years. So do we have the discipline to be consistent, to keep on sitting down, to keep on telling our story, to even just get it out of the committee? I don't know, sometimes people always have that strength to keep going, but we have to figure out that strength within ourselves because there's too much at stake. There's too many young people who are getting bronchitis. I had bronchitis as a child. I believe it had a lot to do with air quality within my community. A lot of kids are getting asthma, has to do with the community. I mean, kids are getting cancer, and it's like, we don't know where this stuff is coming from. You know, just no matter if it's respiratory problems or if it's other type of ailments that are happening, even they're starting to connect the environmental things to people having arthritis. Who would have thought people with bad knees has to do with where you live within your own community? So being consistent and saying like, this is what's happening in your community, and this is how your people are being affected. And if you do not support this bill, we're going to tell the people who get you into office. And that's how you have to do it. You have to almost shame people. We talked about House Bill 6. When House Bill 6 happened, anybody that voted for House Bill 6, they got shamed. Now, I didn't vote for House Bill 6. I'm just going to put that out there. I voted no for the bill. But for those who did, people put up billboards, they had radio ads, they had mailers sent to their community. They got shamed. And so that's how we have to almost do is shame people into being supportive of this because it's taking care of your people. So we have to just be very intentional and very consistent, and our consistency will pay off. So having lobby days, which I highly suggest everyone does, and that's having a day where people come down to the State House and sit down with all 132 legislators in the Senate as well as in the House and make sure that they are aware of the bill and why this bill is so important. Because one key thing I'm gonna tell you, and no one likes to talk about this, a lot of legislators do not read bills. People don't like when I say that. People get real mad. Somebody gonna text me with an angry tweet or email like, oh, that's so mean, you talking about people. No, people do not read. They have their staff read and they're giving out little paragraphs of a synopsis of what's going on. So we have to be in a place where we come right before people and say, no, you're gonna pay attention to this bill because this is important right now. So thank you so much for that question, Jasmine. I could go on and on, but I'll say the rest for the other part.
And we could listen too, because you dropped so many gems. I forgot to mention in the beginning, I'm an organizer too. That's my first love. That's my first passion. And consistency is key. But knowing the power of your story is key. And I know that sometimes when we're in front of people who we feel like they don't identify with us, they don't know us, they don't know our stories, it can be nerve-wracking to tell your story and to get up and tell it more than once and to tell it over and over again. But there is no shame in where you come from. There is no shame in wanting better. There is no shame in any of that. I was a kid. I literally had lead poisoning from living in my home. I had a very old home when I was first born. The first 4 years of my life that I lived in, I had severe levels of lead poisoning. I'm quite sure that led to other things that I suffer from, like ADHD until this day, because lead is a heavy metal, right? So that's why sharing your story is important, but also it's knowing yourself. When you know yourself, you can know what to ask for. And also, that is not tea. Representative Brent, what you said about people not reading the bills, I had firsthand experience as a director of policy, interacting with some of your colleagues that they did not read those bills. But you know what? There is power in that, because if they're not going to read the bills, let them hear your stories and let that move them. And then get into that space like we did with HB6, where we shame people to move them. And the quickest thing that we can do, and I don't care what nobody say about Black people, we know how to tell stories, and we know how to tell stories from the heart that can move people. And that's the thing that we have, is use that pain that we're often taught to be ashamed of, because sometimes shame is a vehicle that's used to silence us and not open us up. And then come back to communities like Vail to get the love, to get the support. Come back to people that we know that are on our side, like Representative Brent. Come back to people like Chanel who are in the community and get the love and the healing that you need, right? Because that's really what we're talking about, right? Is that sustainability. I don't care that it takes 3 years to get something through a committee. But what I do care about is keeping the community in a healed and healthy space, or at least a sustainable place, right? When we're talking about this. And that leads me to my next question, which is education. I think a lot of people don't know that there is power in education, especially non-traditional education. And so when we were talking about the just transition communities, and we were talking about the energy incubators in the bill, one of the things that I really got excited about, and I know Chanel, you brought it up, was apprenticeships, which to me are non-traditional forms of education that are not very much so highlighted in energy, but was a quick way to make sure that we could bring skill sets and jobs back to our community. So when we're talking about apprenticeship programs, and anybody could answer this question, how does this build safe, healthier, and more green jobs in our communities? And how does this just make our communities safer and more sustainable in general? Anybody could answer this question, but I would love to particularly hear from either Samia or Chanel on this one.
I'm gonna start off first because I feel like Chanel's gonna get us all together. We all going the same route. We already know you, Chanel.
Look, I'm going after Chanel because y'all guests in the house tonight. So I'm just smiling and nodding. That's what I'm doing.
Apprenticeships is the pathway for people to not particularly have to have the high level degrees or to have the type of place. Apprenticeships is the way that we get more people in this space of just awareness, just as a whole. A lot of times with apprenticeships, the good thing about apprenticeships compared to internships is that people do also get paid for that. And being a person who was not able to afford to intern places because I needed a job, apprenticeship is definitely a pathway to get people in this place. So I say wording is everything. So just even seeing the word apprenticeship is so much better, particularly when you have people who don't always have access to disposable time or disposable income to be able to be in this space to learn. So that's the biggest key of even being in here in this space. When we talk about what this bill will do, it will give access to people who normally would not have access to the space at all, and still be able to have some type of quality of living by being able to work and do this at the same time. So those are the biggest aspects of that I get from there. Thank you, Jasmine. Take away, Chanel.
Oh my goodness. One of the things that my dad always says, and he's shared with my nephews, because he's a father figure to them in their lives, is that everyone doesn't have to go to college. But an apprenticeship is another form of a 4-year degree. Because once you become an apprentice and you make your way through that process, you become a journey person. I'm not going to say a journeyman, you're going to become a journey person. And that's like a passport that you can use anywhere in the United States as a skilled tradesperson, skilled labor. That opportunity and that access for our community reminds me of what my grandfather moved to Lima for however many years ago when he was escaping the Jim Crow South. It was an opportunity for a job. It was an opportunity to support his family. It was an opportunity for him to bring his siblings to Ohio. And that sort of work or union opportunities have gone away or they've shrunken. But when you think about the just opportunity, there's that just transition, there's an opportunity in that. Now, I do think there are ways that we need to pursue to open up the trades. I know people who would benefit from that program, but maybe they don't have a driver's license yet because they can't afford a driver's license. Or maybe they need to get a birth certificate or they can't afford to get a birth certificate. There are literally access points for our community members that are like $26 for a license that a hurdle that they can't jump. And so I oftentimes think about, like, as community leaders and civic leaders who do have access, right? Because there is a level of privilege for us to be on this call and a level of privilege in our roles to really attack those access issues so that there are on-ramps and opportunities for community members. So there's the apprenticeship side. And then the last thing I will say that there is the manufacturing side. In Perrysburg, Ohio, First Solar is one of the largest solar manufacturers, I think definitely in the country and maybe in the world. My parents actually live 2 minutes from there. But I often wonder, how can people from Toledo who may not have a car, who may need a job, get from Toledo to Perrysburg, Ohio? So what are the other sort of infrastructure needs, public transit dollars that we can really wrap around this just transition? So it's not only access to the job, it's not only access to the apprenticeship, but it's also access to financial wealth and financial mobility. And I think we have to think about this in a system level way, which I think this bill is the start to do that, for us to really piece together all the pieces and the puzzles to make sure that this transition is just, it is fair, and it is equitable.
Yeah, I'm just in the amen corner right now. I am so glad that we are on this call together because, you know, it's moments like this where it's like, we're not out here by ourselves. We're in this together. And to those who are listening that are joining us, we say welcome tonight. We're glad you're here. For those who are listening to the recording, we say thank you for being here also. What comes to my mind when I think about this is climate change is real, and that this, you asked about apprenticeship, but I want to just show how there's that intersectionality of all of these things, that climate change isn't just out here over here, and then apprenticeship is out over here, and then just transition is over here, that they all come together. And I'm going to try my best to kind of weave them together like a braid, you know, like you got the 3 threads and you just kind of bring them in there right there like that. I'm going to try. Y'all just pray, like they say, pray with me, y'all. I'm getting ready to try. So, you know, when we think about climate change, the reason that these things even need to happen is because it's almost like everybody can appreciate, not now with COVID as much, but a run in the stockings, right? A run in the stocking ain't nothing worse than seeing something, a nice dressed lady with a run in the stockings. It just kind of messed the whole thing up. Well, if you allow me to take an analogy right there to say that that's basically what we've done as a world to our ozone layer. We put a run in our stocking, our ozone layer that protects us from the sun's rays. And even though the creator built for us trees and greenery that could replace that, we, in our desire to travel, to go, to have, to do, we've outpaced what our God-given ability to repair has been. And so we gotta, not only do we have a run, but we pulling on it right now. So that being the case, that leads us with things that we've got to do in an accelerated fashion in order to turn that thing around. That's where things like when we talk about renewable energy, why is solar a good thing? Why is solar important? Solar is good important because it slows down the amount of carbon that we're using, and AKA, if you allow me to say, stop pulling a hole in that ozone layer. Why do we need wind? Because it uses those natural energy sources of wind to make power for us. So we can still have light at night, right? Nobody's saying don't have light at night. Nobody's saying don't go on your vacay. We're just saying let's produce it in a way that doesn't use fossil fuel that tear up that ozone layer, and use clean energy, wind, solar, water, the heat from the earth. Let's use those things to get to the same place, which is our energy. Now, we're at a place where we're so behind on that we need to accelerate the preparation of getting solar out there quickly, getting more wind out there, getting these things accelerated. In that accelerated way, that means we need all hands on deck. Everybody need to be a part. Now, this is an opportunity where before we've kind of, as a country, been on this zero-sum mindset. Reason we've been unjustly treated is because it's only a little bit. And if I help you, that means I'm getting ready to lose out. If you win, that means I'm getting ready to lose out. If I win, that means you're going to lose out. So that scarcity mentality puts us in a place that only some people can win, and somebody always got to lose, right? What we're saying here is there is so much need to catch up because Ohio has been not as quick as it could be in getting up to speed with these things, that all hands are on deck. People need to get through these apprenticeships quickly. See how I brought that apprenticeship thing in there? Y'all thought I forgot. They got to get these apprenticeships so people can get in here quicker than they would have in other ways, so that they can start contributing to the increased renewable energy efficiency, and solar and wind. And that also includes our infrastructure for electric vehicles. Why are electric vehicles important? Because when we burn gasoline in our cars, guess what we're putting? More carbon in the air. What are we doing? We're tearing that hole in the ozone just a little bit more. That's how we got 50 degrees the other day, people. I know it felt good and somebody put some shorts on. Shame on you. But that's how we getting 50 degree days in the middle of winter, is because that ozone layer is getting ripped open. I'm gonna bring this home and braid them all together. So climate change is real. We in Ohio, as Chanel said, our policies that get us to less carbon use or carbon reduction, it's got to do it from both sides. Use less fossil fuel and use more efficient ways of producing energy simultaneously. Bring that thing down, and more hands on deck through these apprenticeships and these centers. All of that happens simultaneously. We might have a fighting chance. I'm not gonna say it's as good as putting fingernail polish on that run, but we might have a chance. Somebody know what I meant when I said that. We might just have a chance, because this is what I know, and I'll end with this. Nature will always win, and it will always survive. Now, we can mess around and blow ourselves off the side of this earth if we want to, by it being irresponsible in our choices. But what will happen is all those plants will just grow right on over us and keep on moving. So why not move in sync with, through renewable energy, through energy efficiency, get people, this gives us an opportunity to have a abundance mentality, because there's so much work that's done that even the people that zero sum, they can't even do all the work themselves. They think they can, but they can't, because it's too much work that needs to be done. So all of us win economically and health-wise, and as a global repairing, I almost said it, y'all, repairing of our ozone. All of that. That's what internships mean to me. Don't ask me that question. I mean, apprenticeships mean to me, that it brings it all together. Yeah. And when it all comes together, we all benefit, regardless of the hue of our skin and regardless of the shade of humanity that we represent, because we all breathe air. and we all need clean water. And we all need to know that when we grow our food in the soil, it's not going to poison us.
Mhm.
We all deserve that.
Samia, I kind of want to jump on here. Like, I don't know if we're getting into a conversation piece, but I kind of want to jump on here. But I love the analogy. I'm definitely going to borrow that. But this bill, the way it's structured, is giving and asking for an opportunity to compete, right? It's not saying we're taking this away from you, or we need this from you, or not do this. It says, give us the opportunity to compete and give us access, right? And I think that it's always been like, the conversation has always been binary. Like, you have to choose the environment or the economy.
Right.
Well, there's so many proof cases that advocates have, because I didn't have this 10 years ago, of how you don't have to make that choice between the environment or the economy. And I think we need to use that to our advantage.
Yeah, I just would make one little tweak about that. And when you say, let us compete, I'm going to say, I want to challenge everybody listening to say, let's activate our own agency. You talked about your grandfather coming here from Jim Crow South. My grandmother came here from Jim Crow South. Why did they do that? Because they saw that Jim Crow South was not leading them to where they wanted the generations to be. So they exercised their own agency. And because they did, we have some privilege today that we wouldn't have had they not done that.
Right.
And so I think, that's the only little tweak. I agree with you.
I agree. I agree.
Are we waiting for somebody else to let us come?
No.
Or are we saying, look, you doing this, I'm doing this, let's do this together, and let's all benefit from this. Right. Let's all benefit from this.
And can we pretend like we really got a choice? Like, it might be like tribal differences, whether we talk about race, social class, political preference, religion, but we only got one earth. So I don't know why people are playing like this ain't the time for it, right? And that's why, Samia, I love the bread analogy that you were given, because it's so important. And Chanel, I love when you said that oftentimes we have had to pick between clean water and clean air in the economy. But it's people like us that continue to lose in divested communities. And dare I say divested economies too. And so now we are at a choice, or at a point in 2022 where we just need to know we don't got no choice. Regardless of what you're doing over there and what I'm doing over here, it's the same air over here and over there. It's just like my ppms over here poison me today, but they poison you tomorrow, but we all poisoned. So we just better know it. So we just better know what we know, which is we have one earth, right? And we need to be able to merge our value system to be like, we don't have to pick, because at the end of the day, prolonging the economy won't prolong our health. Because if one community is poisoned, eventually we all are. And it doesn't make any sense. But that analogy with the ozone though, and the pulling apart.
Can I say moving to Mars don't fix it either? Okay, I'm sorry.
Moving apart, we can talk about it though. Moving to Mars isn't going to fix it. Looking to outer space when the answers are right here within our own communities, with humans, like with people who understand your language, have the same body type as you. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. That's what gets on my nerves when we talk about this conversation. Sometimes when we have to pretend like we've never not had a choice. We knew this moment was coming. It was 62 degrees in Dayton. Today was the first day that it was cold outside. It's now currently, the temperature increased, and now it's currently raining in February. I shouldn't know what rain feels like in February, right? And that's the main problem, is we pretend like we don't understand that we only have one earth, or one Ohio, or one community, or one air, or one ozone layer. And now it's just time to fix it. But I just want to take it a step further back when we're talking about this policy, because I really want people on the ground to be able to see themselves in this policy. And a major momentum that's happening in many of our communities is people are just returning to the land. We are living in a time where food is disproportionately high, but even before food being disproportionately high, we've seen people just going back and doing urban ag and urban farming and different things like that, that this EJA bill really just takes and lifts up, right? So how does this bill impact those who have access to the land or who owns the land? And how is there room when we talk about the EJA bill and with the 15 incubators across the state, and when we're talking about green jobs, how do we make this conversation about BIPOC communities to be a part of the land and what we can do with it? I don't know if that question made any sense or not, but basically with the people who are doing urban ag, how can they see themselves in this bill? Because they in this bill, I just need our experts, y'all, to tell them.
So this is Representative Brent. So I'm gonna speak from two different hats as a person who grew up in 4-H since I was a small child, and I was always that Black girl in 4-H, growing things. I had a goat, I had a little calf, and because of the way Cleveland is and because of our rules, I was never able to keep the things that I have for 4-H at home. Obviously, you can't have a goat chilling in your backyard. So one thing we always had to do was rent out barn space. And then even when I was growing things as a child, you could not use the soil that was in your backyard. And imagine telling a kid this, like, well, we're going to test the soil, but then you get the results back and the soil is bad. So everything that you're growing is dealing with raised beds, even as a kid. So what ended up happening is that I ended up having to get land and other places that was rented out as a small child. I say that in a place of privilege, because that's not normal for people to say that they went and rented land for their child to be able to have 4-H projects in. That's real privilege right there. But even in that space, when your land is not usable, that becomes a problem. And that becomes a thing of lack of access within itself. We know I live in a city where we have high levels of lead and also high levels of even mercury, which is in our water, but it's also in our land. And so whatever is in your soil will turn and put into your food. So we can't even use our land to grow like we would like to without having to do other things to work with the land. So that becomes a barrier within itself of who can and cannot do that within our community. How can you teach your children, your neighbors, your nieces and your nephews about agriculture if they don't even have the basic thing of using the land behind their home to be able to have access to it? So just intentionally having a bill like this is giving people the turnkey to say, like, we are intentionally putting some money into these resources. And I just want to just drop some basic information just to kind of give this perspective. This bill will actually develop a whole new department. And I know people get very intimidated by numbers, but I'm gonna give everybody a little perspective on why this bill is so necessary. And this bill is cheap, very cheap. So this bill is asking for about $20 million total, give or take, to open up this new department of energy justice within the state of Ohio as we move on with it. This is really cheap. People are probably cringing, like 20 million is a lot. But if you look at the Department of Agriculture, we spend 499 million for that. Excuse me, 166 million for that. And then for the natural resources, we spend 493 million for the natural resources department. So when you put it in perspective of our other departments, and let's not even talk about education, because you'll just want to go smack somebody for how much we spend on education. This is actually like pennies. So the little Juanita forever ago could be able to have a future to think about, I can grow those tomatoes in my backyard without having a raised bed. 20 million. It's a drop in the bucket of the couple $2 billion that we have in our state budget. It's really nothing. And so just putting that in perspective of the small investment that Ohio could make, that could make a world of a difference when it comes to, young people and older people, because it's not just young people that's out here doing agriculture, but people in our urban neighborhoods who would like to do more things with the land.
Rep. Brent, that makes me think about, like, when we talk about equity versus equality, those numbers that you just shared, it really makes it real easy to see, this is equity. Like, somebody's here with, would you say 100 some million? What was that one? And then here's this bill here with 20 million, right? And it's like, okay, now we at equity. Now we moving forward. We're not even starting there. It doesn't sound like that this bill is starting there. It's saying let's get started. And from that, what we know is people of color are resilient people because they've had to have been. And with that 20 million, you'll probably get 200 million worth of leveraged equity out of that, because people are going to work that thing to make it make sense. Because that being disproportionately impacted means that's what you got to do. Now, do we want to stay in that place? Of course. Ooh, y'all almost said something I shouldn't have said on TV. No, we don't. But I'm going back on mute.
Listen, I'm so glad you brought up the agency, because that, rounding out, because we're getting into our last 10 minutes, is actually what I wanted to talk about. Because I'm an organizer, I spend a lot of time in the community, and everybody that I talk to about anything is always like, but how? But how? I'm so tired of people coming to me and telling me they want to change this, they want to do that, they want to do this, but how? And so I actually want to talk about that how. So my last question for all of us before we get off, and this again is a question for all of us, is from our perspective as environmental justice experts, legislators, and also civic leaders, what are the Energy Jobs and Justice Act? How does these new policies and these new agencies work together to talk about that equity and talk about how we're going to spend that $20 million that Representative Brent said it's just a drop in the bucket because we're just beginning?
One of the things that it'll do is that we'll have actual studies that will be completed in this time period. With the studies, that actually will tell the public, because they'll have to be released to the public and have to be directly sent to like Speaker of the House, who's from Lima, the Senate President, who's from Lima. And it will basically say, like, this is what we are suggesting. Now we got to figure out ways to implement it. And that's where the money comes in. So, and it costs money to do studies. I know sometimes people think studies are free, but you got to pay folks to do studies. So that money will help us do that too. So it's all in the bigger picture of what we're trying to get done with that.
I'll tag in here. So there's the study, but there's also the study committee. And as someone who still considers herself an activist or advocate, I think the how is up to your own agency and what you're comfortable in, right? Some people like being loud on Twitter. Some people like going to legislative meetings. Some people may speak at city council or talk to their council person and say, hey, I need you to send a letter to Columbus on behalf of our ward. I think it's our jobs as people who are in this space and who have been in this space is to create different avenues for the how, for how people are most comfortable engaging. But I will say is that study committee, at least in the bill and what I've seen, it's asking for people who have been impacted or people who are impacted by climate and or by a just transition to be a part of the committee. And I think that's an amazing way for people to not only learn these systems to which we operate in and figure out how to change the system from inside, while other folks are agitating on the outside. And so I think that's a interesting how for people to be engaged.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think about, as I read through the information provided in the bill, is that Governor's Office of Energy Justice, that as these things are coming forward, as Rep. Brent said, those studies are coming forward, and as Chanel said, those testimonies and those stories are coming forward. Now you have this Governor's Office of Energy Justice that is receiving that information so that it doesn't just get dispersed. It's almost like light, right? You can turn on a light bulb and it'll fill the whole room, or you can take that same amount of light and you can hone it. And when you hone it, it becomes a laser. And when it becomes a laser, it can get through anything. So this Governor's Office of Energy Justice brings all of that information. You talk about the how to a place where it can be analyzed, because a story look different when you just have one piece, and when you have 100 pieces and they all saying the same thing, that's a whole different story. And now we have a place to be able to hold all of that together. And so that's a part of the how. And I agree with Chanel. There's a place in this for everybody. Wherever you like to get in where you fit in. Wherever you like to get in, you like legislation, do it there. You like grassroots, do it there. You like grass tops, do it there. You don't know what I'm talking about. You just got a story to tell. You got a mouth to open, and you got an email address. Send it. You know, all of those things matter, and all of them are needed.
And it boils down to one thing also, which each one of these ladies said, which is about accountability, because I am about the numbers, honey. I am. I want to know how you're harming me, and I want to know how you and your government agency thinks that you're harming me. I want to know what you think the ppms in my soil are. I want to know how far it is to clean land. You know, when I'm talking about when you want to go and become an urban agriculturalist, why do you have to travel 5 miles from your home in order to buy a plot of land when you actually sit on a plot of land? Like, you wake up every day and you live on a place that sits on a plot of land. So I am here for accountability, because there's no better understanding for harm rather than what is federally, state, and locally mandated. And I love that sort of accountability, because that accountability, when we're talking about equity, has not been represented in energy. This is the reason why something like HB6 could pass, right? And this is why we have something in EJA that lets us know that we learned our lessons, and now we want accountability from an executive perspective, where we can go and gather the numbers. And like Samia said, the light isn't dispersed everywhere. We're us who are outsiders. And when I mean outsiders, people who are not members of one of the 3 branches of government at the state level. We have to come together and use that. Our community leaders have to come together and gather that information to inform us. One of the best methodologies for change, at least at a policy level, is the implementation, in my opinion, of an executive agency who is federally or legally mandated to tell you the truth. And I learned that lesson the hard way with some of the legislation that I have got passed in different places. So I'm just so happy, Samia, that you brought that up, because that is that accountability piece, and talking about rounded things out that you spoke about in the beginning of this panel, right? When we're talking about why accountability is important, because it's never happened before. That's why we are in where we're at. That's why the ozone layer is so thin. That's why Ohio is in a state of emergency. And to hear that it only costs $20 million to begin to rectify this issue, in which we can build upon accountability as we learn lessons together. It really doesn't matter what you know today. All you know is that we need each other, and that we have a way to fix it, right? And that way to fix it is any way you choose to show up, as each person has said, whether that qualifies for more education. Please send me if you can say the monthly meeting times, or what it would take to become a member of BAIL. I think that would be lovely if people are looking for further education. Representative Brand, I know we only have a couple minutes, but a way to reach out to you with your email address, or, you know, how could people get in contact with you from a policy or a state house perspective? And Chanel, just whatever fire that you want to bring at this point.
So I think of myself as pretty easy to contact. I use all social media. So my Instagram and my Twitter are the same, Juanita_Brent, or you can contact me via my State House email, which is rep12@ohiohouse.gov. If you are ever trying to figure out how do you get in contact with us, remember it's rep, our district number, at ohiohouse.gov. So mine is rep12@ohiohouse.gov. Or you can just call me in my office, 614-466-1408. So very simple, contact me. I'm like an avid Twitter person. I follow Chanel. So I'm constantly on the interwebs, even on vacation or I'm at the State House. I'm definitely a person who likes to keep people very much informed. So please just hit me up.
I'm pretty easy to find. Thanks to social media and Twitter, and also LinkedIn. You know, someone messaged me on Twitter this morning just about their level of anger, and that they're afraid that they're coming off too angry. And I think in many places, in some circumstances, we're told not to present our anger. We're told not to present our frustration. But we got a lot to be angry about. And I think it's okay for you to share, I'm angry about what's been happening to my community over this many decades, and no one is listening to me. But I would say that we have to all figure out how to turn our anger into action. Be angry, be mad, but also find your people, right? Find your people that you can build a coalition with, people you can drive change with, whether that's being involved in local government, local politics, state politics, federal politics, because we belong in every space, in every place. And so those are my final words to share with folks. Like, you may not know where to start, just start. Just start. Just start.
Thank you all. You have just warmed my heart. I'm fired up. Yes, I felt that fire that Jasmine's been promising all night. I know I felt it. Those who are listening, we can reach us at blackenvironmentalleaders.org. Yep, spell it all out. And yes, those two L's are next to each other. Black Environmental Lead, www.blackenvironmentalleaders.org. And on there, you'll see all the membership levels that we have available. It allows us to be able to do these types of things. It allows us to be the amplification of the voice of people all over Ohio, to make sure that these stories are heard, these stories are not forgotten, that they are not ignored. We can also be found on all the Twitter locations through BLK Leader. Let's see, BLK Enviro Leader. So Black, you don't have to spell the whole thing out that way. BLK Enviro Leader single. You can find us on all the Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those places. Because we know people need to get to us how they need to get to us, and know that when you get there, we hope you get the bell effect, and that you understand that this is a safe place for you to come, for you to connect, for you to explore, and for your voice to get amplified, because it's the built and the natural environment. It's all of it. It's all of that. And we are here to serve. Jasmine, thank you. Chanel, thank you. Rep Brent, thank you. It has been amazing spending this Thursday night with you all, and we appreciate you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, and I want to thank each and every last one of you. So thank you, Representative Brent. Thank you, Chanel. Thank you, Samia. But also thank you to the people who are watching, because this is just the beginning, and we really do need y'all. I know y'all see that there's 4 of us right now, but this is really the beginning of a movement. And if policy ain't your calling like it's my calling, or numbers ain't your calling like it's like my calling, you just got to find whatever yours is. But understand, like we basically said, we got one earth, we got one air, we got one true source of water, and that's just fresh water, y'all. So we got to keep it moving, and we got to keep it going, and we got to know that we deserve to take up space and self-determine. So with that being said, thank you so much for coming out to our panel tonight, and we will see you next week.